Welcome, and thanks for joining me for the Achieve Compliance in the Modern Workplace with Microsoft 365 session. I'm Nick Robinson, Senior Product Marketing Manager for Microsoft 365, and I'm excited to be here with you today. What we're going to go through today is really a survey course on our compliance solutions in Microsoft 365. And we want to start out with a little bit of context setting around the challenges we see our customers grappling with in the compliance space. And then we'll dive right into some demos of new capabilities and updated capabilities that we have in order to help customers achieve their compliance needs and obligations. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So we know on the journey to the cloud that there's top concerns that come to mind as organizations consider their move to the cloud. And those are around security. And in fact, 73% of organizations indicate that security is a top challenge holding back their cloud service adoption. Next, we know that 89%, nearly all of the organizations see compliance as an important component around bringing their content to the cloud. And so they're required to govern their content for compliance and business continuity purposes, extremely important and critical to business and continuing operations in a profitable way. And then finally, transparency and ensuring that organizations have transparency and control into the data that's kept in the cloud and the cloud storage. And so with these kind of top of mind concerns as organizations come to the cloud, we're going to focus on the compliance and the transparency aspects in today's discussion. So I wanted to take a look out there into the world and talk a little bit about what we hear from our customers around achieving organizational compliance. And so, in fact, the regulatory landscape is highly complex. If you're consuming this session, you're probably already aware of the high degree of regulations that are applicable to many organizations. And in fact, we know that there's over 200 updates per day from over 750 regulatory bodies. So just staying up to date with the regulations and obligations that you have as an organization can be a very daunting task in itself. And so as we think about this type of challenge, we have a component in our capabilities around an assessment and providing the capabilities to assess and understand where your organization is as related to the relevant regulations and obligations that you have as a part of doing business. And then secondly, we know that 45% of organizations are saying that a lack of data governance strategy is creating openings to them for security and compliance risks. And so we know there's a huge opportunity around information governance and creating a comprehensive strategy around keeping the right data and getting rid of the rest of the data in order to really ensure that you keep your costs of storage low, but also reduce your risk of keeping data that you don't need. And so within our capabilities, we have capabilities around governing your data strategy and implementing specific controls. And then next, we know that significant investment is spent on eDiscovery every year. And so it's over $9 billion is spent by organizations focused on eDiscovery investigations. And we know that there's a discover phase of compliance obligations that's critical. You need to be able to access the data you need when you need it and to turn that over to regulators or to be able to provide that as part of a litigation or an investigation. And so within the Microsoft 365 capability, our eDiscovery brings forward that ability to discover the information when you need it and make sure that's available. And then, as I mentioned, the transparency aspects. So ensuring that you have full confidence and control around who has access to your data and when, and making sure that transparency is there so that organizations can adopt with confidence and not have any questions about who can gain insight into their data, so on and so forth. So within the control aspect, we have a number of capabilities that help you control your data, ensure that you are the end controller of that data and no one else is getting access to that, whether Microsoft or other entities. And then finally, we know that data proliferation is literally out of control. At Microsoft, we have a statistic where people in roles like mine, product marketing managers, over the last 7 years, the rate of data that we're creating in our day-to-day jobs has increased 12 times. And we know that this is emblematic of what's going on across the industry. And so we see 50% year-over-year growth in the data that's being created in the modern workplace. And there's increasing complexity of that data. And so within our capability, we also have comprehensive audit capability that provides visibility into everything that's happening in your environment. So as we map these customer challenges and think about the way that organizations are grappling with achieving compliance, we want to make sure that we're satisfying with our capabilities across each of these workflow steps. So that's a quick introduction of the landscape and the types of questions that we're hearing from our customers as we bring forward these compliance solutions. So next I want to just talk a little bit about how important to Microsoft and to Microsoft 365 building a trusted cloud is. And I want to emphasize that this is from the top to the very bottom of the organization. You have probably heard our mission before, but we're about empowering every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And that's really core to everything we do on a daily basis at Microsoft and at Microsoft 365. And so I just wanted to emphasize that this is extremely important to us and how we operate our business. In fact, if you're following the news this week, we're at the Supreme Court. Our chief legal counsel is arguing on behalf of our customers about protecting data access and privileges and ensuring that our customers have the first opportunity to respond to any inquiries about their data and access to their data. That's the level of commitment that we bring to the table around creating a trusted cloud and ensuring that our customers have confidence bringing their critical data to our cloud and operating in the cloud-first world. So I just want to emphasize the importance of this and how this is really central to our focus and our approach within our professional cloud services. So then moving a little bit forward as we look at how this is implemented within our capabilities, specifically within Office 365, which is where we'll spend most of our time today looking at our capabilities, we've really built in several aspects that work to deliver this and build this trusted cloud reputation and presence in the market. And so this is really about bringing security first and best-in-class security built into the products that you use and depend on every day. This is about designing with privacy in mind and ensuring that privacy is built in throughout your experience, whether you're an end user or an administrator. Compliance, as we'll talk about, this is a commitment to meeting industry standards and delivering this rich set of applications, and we'll go deep into these capabilities today. And then finally, as we talk to transparency, so ensuring that you have transparency into our operations so that you have full confidence to understand what we're doing for your service, a holistic view of availability, and all the service operations that goes into providing the cloud service like Microsoft 365 directly to you. So these are really some of the principles that we've embedded within the Office 365 service to ensure that we can continue to gain your trust and deliver quality professional services. So next I want to just quickly highlight our global hyperscale enterprise grade infrastructure. So we have enterprise reliability with over 100 data centers and our global network edge. We also have commitments around no standing access to data, so a transparent operational model. And we'll look at some of these components around access control and customer lockbox later on in the presentation that are very important to ensuring this confidence. And then finally, a financial backed SLA. So we're committed to 99.9% uptime. And if we don't meet that uptime guarantee, we're actually on the hook to reimburse our customers financially to ensure that. Again, secure by design, we're operationalized at the physical, logical, and data layers, and we're committed to compliance leadership. And so we have a number of certifications, and we'll continue to add those over time. This is an area of great importance to us and something that we focus on an ongoing basis. And so just to focus a little more closely on those ongoing controls and certifications, we have over 1,100 controls now in Office 365 and in the compliance framework. And this is enabling us, and we're working to stay up to date with the industry standards as they change. And then our service is regularly audited. We submit self-assessments and independent third-party audits, and we hold the key certifications required to ensure confidence for our customers as they move to the cloud. So this is something that we're very committed to and continuing to invest in on an ongoing basis. Before we jump into the capabilities and look at some of the demos and kind of the workflow that we talked about, I wanted to set the context around our compliance vision and spend a few minutes here about how this comes to life in the experiences that you'll see as we move forward. And so one of the key nuances that I want to emphasize is that Office 365 and now Microsoft 365 is about productivity. That's the key value add that we can bring to organizations and that customers look to us as experts in that we can deliver. And so this is productivity first in Office 365. And so we're bringing compliance capabilities into a productivity service and ensuring that that unparalleled productivity can take place in a compliant way. and that we're not degrading productivity or hampering end user workflows in the service of compliance. Rather, we want to ensure that productivity is enabled and supported in a compliant way. So it's a nuance in how we approach this, but it's an important one, especially as we work with our customers who are laser focused on compliance, whether they're the Chief Compliance Officer team or in the risk team. Want to emphasize that we really prioritize productivity. The second component of our vision is that this is in place. And this is an important component that you'll see as we go through around reducing the number of places you have to have content in order to be compliant. So building rich and effective compliance features right into the service to keep your important customer content where it is, to protect it in place, retain it in place, and have that strategy, the compliance controls built onto that. So you're reducing proliferation of data content and being copied in multiple locations. And then finally, it's suite-wide. So you can easily apply compliance controls across the suite of Office 365, whether it's Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, team sites, things like Groups, and now Microsoft Teams. You can easily control and define your compliance components using the Security and Compliance Center within Office 365 and have those controls proliferate across your Office 365 workloads. So these are really some of the key components that we bring to the table when we talk about compliance solutions, vis-a-vis the rest of our Office 365 suite. And they're important to understand as you continue your journey with Office 365 and compliance and how you think about implementing these controls within your service. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump back into that framework that I mentioned, where we're looking at the process through which a Chief Compliance Officer and the compliance team, the IT administrator in your organization would think about the different work phases and important components of compliance, and we're gonna walk through this from a product lens to show a little bit of what we have. So if we start with the assess phase and just staying up to date with all of the components and regulations that are applicable to your organization, we're gonna take a look at Compliance Manager. And this is a place that you can go and understand how you measure up against the available controls within Microsoft 365 to achieve compliance for the regulations that are relevant to your organization. And then we'll look at that govern phase and take a look at advanced data governance and understand how you can apply retention and deletion and really make sure that you're keeping the right data and getting rid of the rest of the data that's no longer important or salient to your business operations. And then with discovery, looking at our eDiscovery capability that allows you to establish cases and manage cases throughout your environment, search and export content, and also reduce that content using machine learning. And then control, the customer key and customer lockbox aspects that provide that visibility and control around access to your data. And finally, with auditing capability, the management activity API and the archiving that we have built into the service to help you have full confidence of what is taking place in your organization and full visibility into those actions, including things like setting alerts and getting notifications. So this is the roadmap for the rest of the session. As I mentioned, we'll cover all of these capabilities specifically, and we'll do demos of a couple of them. So as we jump into the assess portion of this and think about one of the key questions that we hear from customer organizations is, how do you manage an already complex compliance landscape when standards and regulations are constantly changing? This is the proverbial moving target, if you will. And so in fact, we have a survey that says almost half of executives are unsure about what compliance standards actually apply and are relevant to their organization. So we see this as a huge opportunity to help customers really see where the target is and what they need to get to and what controls they have that are available to them that they can implement to achieve this compliance. And so we've recently released Compliance Manager. It was in preview for a couple months, and now it's been released to general availability actually just this past week. And what this does is this provides a real-time risk assessment of your compliance posture against the evolving regulations that are related to your organization. And so it's specific to your tenant organization. You can log into it and authenticate in with your tenant ID and quickly understand how you are sitting relative to the Microsoft controls that are available to you for a particular regulation and also the customer controls that you have in place. Not only can you get a quick sense of where you are, you also have the opportunity to manage a workflow around this. So you can actually assign tasks out to members of your team to complete test and validation and track some of the activities and the controls that you've taken in place. And so what we're delivering here is a simplified view of compliance and really the streamlined workflow to help you manage your compliance as related to the Microsoft 365 cloud. And then finally, this also includes audit-ready reports. So as we go through the demo, you'll see that I can then, once the controls are configured and I'm at a place where I'm feeling comfortable, I can actually export this to Excel. So it's a quick and ready to share document that provides an audit of what I've done. And then I'm ready to be able to share that to a regulator, internal body, or anyone else who needs verification of that work and capability. So as I mentioned, Compliance Managers just come general availability. I urge you to go and visit the Service Trust Portal. If you just take a quick bang on that, you'll come to it and you'll have an opportunity to link into the Compliance Manager where you can authenticate in and take a quick look at what's available there. So we'll do a look at how the Compliance Manager comes across, and we'll do that with a quick look through at some of the slides that show the experience from the point of view of the Chief Compliance Officer at Contoso, which is kind of a fictional company that we use for a lot of our demonstrations. So in this case, you can see at the top, I'm logged in as Megan Bowen at Contoso. And in this scenario, Megan is looking at the Compliance Manager to get a handle on her GDPR readiness and her approach towards GDPR. And so what you can see here quickly is a view of the assessments that are related to my organization. I also have a tab around action items. And so this is the experience that Megan has as coming to this. It's customized to her. Once she's onboarded to this, she can actually work with her IT admin for Office 365 to designate role-based access controls to the Compliance Manager so that this becomes really a workspace for the compliance team. Now, in this case, Megan's interested in kind of getting a handle on what's going on here. So she can see that GDPR is one of the assessments that's available here. So if she clicks on that, then she can get a few more details into what's going on with this particular regulation. And she can see that she has a certain level of completion against this, but there's a number of things that she still has opportunities to complete. And so she's interested in getting a handle on what all is included here. So first we give a sense of the in-scope services. So you can see here the list of services that are in scope for this assessment. Over time, this will expand beyond Office 365. You can see this list is pretty Office-centric today to include the other components within Microsoft 365, namely EMS, the Enterprise Mobility Suite, and Windows 10. And so this gives a sense of what's going on, what's included in that service specifically. Next, Megan's interested in the Microsoft managed controls. So if you think about this, this is a handshake between Microsoft and your customer organization, Contoso in this case. So there's some things that we actually manage on behalf of our customers, and there's other things that customers really have to manage particularly. So we're going to take a look at the Microsoft managed controls first. And in this case, we're going to select the control family that we'd like to see more details about. So this is going to be the accountability and action control family, and we're going to take a quick look at that piece specifically. And so you can see the corresponding certification requirement, the description of the control, the status of the control, the test day, and the test results. And so in this case, Megan's interested in some more information. So she's going to go ahead and click to see more information, which is going to give a number of more details about how Microsoft has implemented this control, how Microsoft tested the effectiveness of the control implementation. And for a control that didn't pass the test, we'd also provide a management response that gives more controls about that risk in particular. So next, Megan's interested in the customer managed controls and understanding the control details and the recommended actions that Contoso can take to implement the control. So Megan's going to go ahead and click on the customer managed controls. And in this case, she's interested in the individual participation and redress set of controls that you can see down here below. And so clicking into that, Megan can see the control IPO 102, which is for the GDPR 15.3. And this is around the article that requires organizations to establish a process for providing personal data copies if the data subject requests it. And so here, Megan can take a quick look at this and see the summary of recommended actions. that are recommended for this control family and links to the product support pages that Microsoft provides. And I can even get more detail here, and you can see that this opens this up and recommends specific steps that Megan and her team should take to implement data classification and labeling, and then enforcing the policy, and then enabling the organization to execute a content search to find the data subject's personal information. And so this gives that host of actions that are recommended. We can also give Megan some advice on the business process to implement the control. So clicking ahead, we give the control management tool for customer managed controls. So Megan is actually going to use this control to communicate with Alan on her team, the IT admin, who will oversee implementing this control. So in this case, she can open this up and assign the task to Alan. So you can see here that, hey, I'm going to fill this out and assign the task to Alan. I'm going to set a priority on this task. In this case, this is high priority because it's coming up and it's GDPR related, and it's definitely a high priority for Alan to pay attention to, something she wants him to jump into right away. And so now that she's set that, she can include notes on what needs to be done for Alan and send that over to him. So not only does it give you a sense of what you need to do, it can actually help you manage this workflow. And again, as I mentioned, you can get the role-based access controls so that you have access for the right people with the right level of access, and you can start to manage those access points. So now, back at the home page, you can see at the top, I'm now logged in as Alan. So this is now about Alan's experience. And so he's received access to these controls, and now he has the opportunity to act on the necessary actions within the Actions Items tab. So because he is the receiver of this action, if he clicks on Action Items, he can see here that he has an action waiting for him that's been assigned to Megan, and she's just sent that over. And so then Alan can go ahead and follow the recommended actions using the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center because he's the IT admin. And he can design a business process to fulfill the data subject request. So now that this has been met, Alan can make a note of that and upload it. And so he's actually going to open this and upload the document that's related to this process into the system to kind of verify that this has taken place. And he can then go ahead and select reassign the task and send it back to Megan now that he's done his portion of the work. And so he's going to complete this out and send it back to Megan. And now that it's been taken care of, it's not such a high priority, it's more of a medium priority, and he can fill in the details around this task specifically and send that back over to Megan. And so now that this has been done, he can actually also set kind of what was the result of the test. And so for this control specifically, was it implemented? Was it not in scope? Was it alternative implementation? And so for this case, he's going to go ahead and say that it was implemented. He'll capture the date that it was implemented on, which will be important for kind of audit verification. And then he'll also set the status on this. And given that this has been passed, he'll set this as passed. So he's completing the workflow around this particular control, and the test result was passed, and then he can go ahead and close that out. And now you can see on the all-up GDPR assessment that the organization is one control closer to the full opportunity for compliance using Microsoft 365. And so this is kind of that one-stop shop where you can dig into and understand and take action against the controls that are available to you. And then, as I mentioned, you can export this to Excel and get a nice spreadsheet that's ready-made to be shared either internally or externally in response to request of documentation. So one of the key parts of many regulations, including GDPR, is process documentation and proof of execution. So this provides that in an easy to get a hold of way and an easily shareable way. So that was a quick look at Compliance Manager. As I mentioned, the preview has been out there for a few months. You can go ahead and get at this via the Service Trust portal, servicetrust.microsoft.com, and sign in there and start to look around and understand everything that's available for you there. So now that we've talked through the assessment piece and kind of what we're doing to make sure that you have a handle on your organization's requirements around applicable regulations, we want to now turn the conversation to governing your data. And really this is about how can you govern your data to keep what you need and get rid of everything else. And we hear from organizations again and again that this is becoming top of mind as security is also elevating and becoming top of mind. And so there's a couple of examples that we've heard from recently from customers around organizations that have been subject to breaches. And now, because they've kept data in perpetuity and have never gone through the exercise of defining what data should be let go of at what times, sensitive data that has been in the organization for 15, 20 years has been exposed now through these breaches. And so they're actually on the hook to provide fraud protection for former employees whose data is really no longer business relevant and should have been deleted many years ago. And so this really becomes a risk issue and a security issue for many organizations. And in fact, 41% of organizations are saying that enforcing this data governance policy is their single biggest issue and one of their biggest challenges around compliance. So this is something that we're focused on with our capabilities in Office 365. And we like to highlight it vis-a-vis kind of how we see organizations doing this before the prevalence of cloud services and before bringing data into the cloud and managing it there. And so when we look back, what we hear in a lot of cases is that this is about outsourced data journaling and sending exchange data to a third party and outsourcing that content and keeping a copy of it in another place. And so we think there's some challenges around this. This increase your costs. So you've got another storage service. You're storing that same data in two places, so you're paying for the storage in multiple times. It also increases your risk. So not only are you creating another copy of that data, but you also have to be concerned with the security of that separate third-party outsourced location and ensure that there's best-of-breed security components in place there. It also just does a snapshot of the data, so it's point in time, whereas the in-place, we can really keep the data and the retention up to date as users are changing the data and creating new data. There's increased time required to find the relevant data when you're sending into a journaling solution. And then there's no service-wide insights around looking across your service and your content types to help draw correlations and insights and provide recommendations. So it's really kind of that stamp and send to another place. We believe we can improve on that, and what we're hearing from customers so far who have adopted advanced data governance is they're getting value from that in-place suite-wide solution that we're able to provide. So how does that look? For Office 365, this is kind of our framework about how we think about data governance. And so, you know, as we think of the life cycle, and this is really about bringing your data into Office 365. So we provide an intelligent import service where you can actually selectively manage your data as it comes into the service, and you can do this via network upload or by actually shipping your drives to us, and we'll import this into your tenant. And then applying governance strategies to that data. And this might be retention policies, it might be labeling your sensitive data, might be creating a disposition process and identifying the right disposition reviewers around that. So really ensuring that you have your data on a schedule, you're keeping what you need, and you're getting rid of that redundant, obsolete, and trivial data that you no longer need in your organization. And then finally, monitoring and understanding everything that's going on around that data in your environment. So this is things like the audit capability, activity alerts that are taking place in your organization. And underpinning that all is this concept of intelligence and bringing machine learning into the equation. And so you'll see with some of our automated classifying capabilities where we're actually able to auto-apply a label based on a sensitive data type that's contained in a document. We're able to ease some of the burden for your end users and for your implementers in your organization around classifying and managing this data. And so that's one of the benefits that we can bring as we implement this in a cloud service world. Now, we know there's a number of personas across most organizations that are relevant to data governance, and so this is something that ends up being a partnership between the IT administrator, the compliance officer, the records manager in many cases, and of course the end users and the information workers. And so in a way, it takes a village to execute a comprehensive data strategy. What we're doing is providing a centralized location to do that within Office 365 and a comprehensive way to govern that with a strategy across not just your email data, but also your content stored on sites and other locations. So that's kind of a quick overview of the broad strokes of how we think about data governance in Office 365. Let me just take us through some of the specific features. So I mentioned import, drive shipping, network upload. We also have the ability to bring in third-party data that might be relevant, whether it's Twitter, Bloomberg, and this is something that we can do through partners. And then providing the opportunity to apply retention policies and disposition policies for that data that's in Office 365. Records management using end-user classification across Outlook, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Groups, and then manual review of the disposition and reporting and permissions that's associated to those records. We're also SEC 17A4 compliant, which is something that's of critical importance to many of our financial customers here in the United States. Not relevant for everybody, but we have a number of features that are specifically tuned towards this financial services regulation around preservation lock, immutability, and supervision. And we've found that other industries are also finding value in those capabilities as well. And then, of course, the Security and Compliance Center. So this is the one-stop portal where you can manage your entire data governance and, in fact, security capabilities for Office 365. And with advanced data governance is where we can bring in machine learning and automation into the process to help, as I mentioned, reduce your burden of instrumenting and applying this type of governance into your organization. So this is where we're able to classify data based on automatic analysis. We can detect things like age, user type. We have over 80 sensitive data types that are available out of the box that you can tag and use to label information. We also provide recommendations based on some of the insights we can glean from machine learning around different things that you should apply. Hey, we found this sensitive data type in your organization. Wouldn't you like to manage this and provide that proactive recommendation for the security and compliance admin? And then ensuring that you have the opportunity to take action right from the Security and Compliance Center to preserve this data in place and get rid of what you no longer need. And really making sure that action and taking that step is forefront and very available and easy for our security and compliance admins. So speaking to that automatic classification, as I mentioned, we have over 80 sensitive data types built in today. We're going to be adding more over time, but these are things like credit cards, national identification numbers, so on and so forth. We also have the ability to define a custom policy using a keyword or query based. And so for many organizations, it could be a contract name, a contract number, or something that contains attorney-client privilege that they'd like to detect and classify and then protect or either retain or delete depending on the context. But we're able to help define those queries and then apply them based on that free-form setting around keywords or queries. And then using the content search capability available as a part of the eDiscovery within the Security and Compliance Center, then you can find all the content that's classified with a specific label. And so this is particularly helpful in the GDPR context where you might have a set of data subject requests from an employee around the PII that's in the system. And instead of searching the entire corpus of data that might be available on John Doe, you can actually target the data that's been classified as PII to find just that data that's relevant and execute that search and that request more quickly and efficiently in your organization. So one example of how that's utilized. And then, as I mentioned, around the recommended policies, so we can detect the certain data types and recommend a retention policy against that. For example, in our healthcare organizations, HIPAA-related information is obviously critical, and we can we can detect things that would qualify as HIPAA and then make recommendations around applying the 6-year required retention period to that type of data. And so this is one example of how we'll start to do more and more of this intelligent detection and then recommendations to that security and compliance admin. And finally, that taking action. So what are the actions that you can take? You can take a retention action. And this is about retaining content in your site's mailboxes indefinitely for a specific duration, and then conversely deleting that data. So deleting is a form of retention in a way. Hey, we're going to get rid of this data that we don't need and could actually pose a risk to us, either kind of that risk I described around a breach or another type of risk, depending on what type of data it is. And so putting that data on a deletion cycle. And of course, these are both in place. So data is remaining in its original location, and users continue to access that data, update that data, create new data, but so that they're continuing to work and ensuring that the productivity remains. And so that content is preserved at the time of the policy being created so that we have visibility into both the in-place nature of the retention based on that content and then also the ongoing updates to that content based on the work that's taking place in the organization. And then, as I mentioned, we introduced supervision, which is really targeted around enabling financial services firms to meet their obligations from a compliance perspective, but we're finding an uptake in a number of other industries as well. And so this includes communications coverage around email, and then also around third-party communications around Facebook, Twitter, Bloomberg. And so with this capability, you can define multiple policies. You can define the reviewers who are going to be scoped and then who the subjects are in the organization. And then the review experience is actually built right within Outlook so that the supervisor is able to review a sample of the communications going back and forth. In many cases, this is communications between a broker and a trader type of relationship. And that reviewer has an easy to consume read experience within the Outlook web app. And so that's the supervision capability. And then some capabilities coming up around event-based retention and disposition review. And so creating a defensible and consistent process for getting rid of data over time. And this is important so that organizations are able to defend the process that they use and show and provide documentation of the multiple steps that they've gone through to ensure that the deletion action was the correct action based on the data that was there. So you can identify the reviewers that should be involved at the end of the retention policy, whether it's an individual or an Office 365 group or a certain group of individuals. And then you can manage those retention periods based on specific events. And so this is something that's coming to the service soon around events-based retention. So certain triggers that take place in an organization could be around an employee leaving the company, a contract expiring, a project or a matter closing, triggering retention based on that content that's related. So many organizations, including law firms, are putting this into place for, at the time of a matter closing, we're going to then trigger a 5-year retention based on all the content associated to that matter. And this is something that's in preview right now and coming to the service soon that many customers have been actively awaiting and looking forward to. So that's a quick overview of all the pieces that we have in data governance. I do want to spend a few minutes and show the capability through a demo. So I'm now showing my dashboard here. I've logged into the Security and Compliance Center, and I'm at the home level here, which gives me a sense of what's going on across security as well as compliance in my organization. And on the left nav, I'm actually going to drill down a little bit and go down to the data governance node specifically. And so if I land on the dashboard here within data governance, I can quickly get a sense of what's going on within my organization vis-a-vis my data governance strategies. So here I can see that 100% of my users are covered under a retention policy. I can also see the percentage of users that's covered by an archiving policy for their mailbox. And I can get a sense of my content over time. How is it growing? What are the different things that are going on about it? Today now I'm interested in setting a specific retention policy for a group within my organization. So I already have the universal policy set up here that you can see. And so that the universal policy is there. So I've created a policy to catch all of my users in the organization. But I want to create a specific policy around a group in my organization that deserves or requires a higher level of retention. So in this case, I might say this is a HBI retention, and we're going to do R&D. So for the R&D folks in our organization, really important work, work that takes a long time to come to fruition. Sometimes work that was done years ago becomes relevant at a later time. So for this group specifically, I want to have a long-term retention policy applied. And so I'm just going to go ahead and put a description and say this is a long-term retention policy. And then you can see that I can go ahead and set the retention around this. So in this case, I want to probably won't do it forever, quote unquote forever, that's a long time, but for this long, and so in this case, let's do 10 years because this is kind of the extended policy. And I can decide if I want it from when it was created or when it was last modified. And what do we want to do after this time? I can decide if it's to be deleted or not deleted. And then I can go ahead and start to set up this policy. I have the option of doing all locations, or I can choose specific locations. And so in this case, you can see that I have both locations-based and I also have recipient-based. And so in this case, I'm primarily interested in doing the OneDrive and the Exchange email for the related individuals. And so I can actually toggle off the other locations, and then I can choose or exclude the recipients. So now for this demo, I won't go through adding the specific recipients, but this is where I would actually go ahead and choose the folks that make up that R&D team. And it could even be a group, a distribution list, where I say, hey, this is everyone that reports to the R&D leader, or this is an alias around that R&D team specifically. And you can see here that my address list is populated, and this gives me the opportunity to check which individuals this should apply to. And so this location and user-based retention is a really powerful way to start to implement a governance strategy in a few quick, easy steps. And so now that I've got that set up, I can review my settings, and I can see here that this is the HBI retention. It's long-term. It's set up around these different places. And if I had added the users, we'd see the users that were saved there, and I can go ahead and create this policy. And just like that, I'm already starting to get a handle on the retention policies that are relevant for my organization, important for my business continuity purposes. And so as that starts to proliferate, I want to show one other thing within advanced data governance, which is around labeling and creating a label and then applying that label and associating policies to that label for both protection and retention. So in this case, we're going to focus on the retention side of it, but one of the neat things that's come recently is the ability to set this label and then set protection and retention all within one workflow. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and create this label. And this one I'm going to say is, let's say this is PII, HBI, PII. And this is something we're going to try and connect around. So I can enter a description for admins. I can also enter a description for end users. And we'll just go ahead with that for now. Then I can decide if I want to include retention here. And a capability we just shipped is another node around this where I can include protection, like DLP, sharing, putting watermarks, so on and so forth. But here I have the opportunity to set the retention periods for these pieces. And then I can review that. And in this case, this is HBI PI, so I'm actually going to create this label. And then now, I have the opportunity to take a couple different actions now that this label has been created. So I can publish this label, which means that it shows up for end users across their work environment. So now an end user could actually use this label for content that's in their email or in their OneDrive or in some of their team sites. Because I have somewhat low confidence in my end users taking the time to apply a label to all their documentation, I'm really interested in this auto-apply this label capability. So I'm going to go ahead and check that out. And what I can do here is I'm going to say this is the HBI PII label that I just set up, and this is around a 7-year retention. And I'm going to choose the conditions around this. So I can say, hey, I want to apply this label to content that contains sensitive information, or do I want to apply this label to content that contains specific words or phrases? And so in this case, I want to use our auto detection of sensitive data types to apply this label. And so here you can see that I have the opportunity to identify either a custom policy, and this is where I can actually choose the conditions that would trigger applying this label, or I can choose from a number of existing sensitive data types that are relevant for my organization. So here, this is around PII, so we're going to look in privacy. It might be that the France Data Protection Act is the relevant sensitive data type that I want to detect and then apply this label against. So this includes things like the France National ID card and the France Social Security number. So let's go ahead and select that one. So this gives me a sense of the data that's there. There's a myriad other options that we could have chosen, and it gives you a breakout of what's included. And then I can go ahead and set that up, and I'm going to say again, this is HBI PII retention. And then I can choose the locations, again, that I want to apply this to. And this is where we'll actually go into my environment, my Live Office 365 environment, and crawl to understand where I have this type of sensitive data and then label it as such and apply that retention. So in this case, I want to do it everywhere because I want that PII discovered and labeled. And so I'm going to push that out, and then I can select Auto Apply. And so this starts to then proliferate into your environment to start to label that information. Organizations are seeing a huge value in this way to auto-apply this information. One of the big challenges we hear again and again is how do we actually implement this strategy in a comprehensive way? So harnessing that intelligence in the cloud is a big leg up. So just wanted to show that quickly now that this policy has been created, and it's taking 7 days to work through my environment and apply that label specifically. So one of the things I wanted to highlight as a part of this talk, and not exactly the core focus, but is the way that we're thinking about Microsoft information protection all up. And you'll start to see more and more of this from us around thinking of information protection across the ecosystem. So not just in your Office 365 environment, but also the data and sensitive data that you have on premise, that you have on devices, and really thinking about the life cycle of that content as the critical piece, and the endpoints to which it travels being shared through users, being sent to different locations as just kind of where it surfaces, and that the protection and the retention and the assets, the components around that actual piece of data travel with the content itself. And so you'll see with things like Azure Information Protection and the labeling capabilities we have in Office 365 really coming together to build that unified end-to-end story about how we're protecting information across Microsoft 365. So just wanted to highlight specifically, this is one area that we're going to, and you'll see data governance evolving in this way and some of the other components as well. And so, you know, it's Office, it's Azure, it's Windows, it's third parties, and really thinking across the ecosystem for our customers about how to protect information at all these different endpoints and use cases. And so one thing we announced recently is actually the ability to protect PDFs as well. So we know that a large amount of sensitive content is held in PDFs. Now we're starting to be able to understand and classify that type of content as well, which takes us outside of just Office documents and moves into another important area. One of the things that we hear a lot from customers is you have a lot of our critical data within Office 365. How can we effectively investigate, manage, and reduce the volume of content that's required for our defensible review as a part of a litigation or eDiscovery process? And we know this is a big challenge and something that's top of mind because 3/4 of the costs that are caught up in eDiscovery are in the review process. And so this is when you're sending the data out to be reviewed by either outside counsel or in-house legal, and to understand what's relevant to the case. And so with the eDiscovery components in Office 365, we're able to enable a large range of scenarios. So this is the capability around creating a case, identifying where you want to apply legal holds, and then searching content, whether it's specific to the data that's on hold or more generic to the entire ecosystem, using filtering and targeting searching within those searches to really get a handle on the data that's relevant. And so it's secure access where you can have multiple roles that are related to eDiscovery so that people can have access to a particular case, but not all cases, and that you can manage that eDiscovery process. There's also self-serve case management tools. So investigators can create and manage the cases, they can put the data on hold, they can perform these searches and export. And so you can identify subjects, witnesses, and custodians that are relevant to a case, search for that relevant data that I mentioned, and then enable collaboration between the different stakeholders that are critical to the eDiscovery process. And so this is kind of the basic eDiscovery, where it's not just investigations and litigation, but it's other things that are case-based, that require workflow, require access to data, ability to understand what's been going on in the organization as related to specific topics. And so the way that we think about this is that within Office 365, we're able to enable portions of this workflow right within a specific case. So identifying and preserving the relevant data, searching for documents that might be relevant, ranking documents by their relevance, and then organizing those documents and recognizing topics that were within that, and then viewing and tagging those documents sorted by relevance and similarity. So you're starting to take that vast amount of data and triage it down into a much smaller data set that's more manageable, more relevant, and ultimately gets the data that's required for the investigation or the case or the topic at hand. And so really using the capabilities in Office 365 to start to cull that, manage that, reduce, and get to that most important data that's relevant. And so within Office 365, we've recently increased our real-time index limits, so you can see some of the old and some of the new. This was based on customer feedback. We have a great set of customers who are harnessing eDiscovery in Office 365 for their eDiscovery needs, and they're very open about giving us feedback of what they need. This is one of their top needs, and it's something we implemented within the last 6 months and has been a big value for customers. We also provide a number of different export options. So being able to get at your data and export that data is critical. You can do a native export. You can just browse the export via Excel, or you can export into a full review tool. And so this might be any number of providers are providing full review. Depending on the case and what's going on, you might have a review tool that you're obligated to use. We provide the ability to export into that review tool as well to enable the workflow that you require as part of your processes. And then within advanced eDiscovery, which is kind of the advanced component that really helps you reduce that amount of data required for review. And so Microsoft eDiscovery team has adopted both eDiscovery and advanced eDiscovery, and we've had tremendous results in how we're able to reduce our time and our costs of eDiscovery. And so Microsoft, just as a quick example, we've actually reduced our cost per custodian by 45% using advanced eDiscovery to reduce the amount of content that needs to be reviewed. So this is all about harnessing the Equivio analytics capability now within Office 365 to use predictive coding and train the system to find likely relevant documents. And so this is really harnessing that machine learning capability based on an expert who's going through and actually training the system on what's relevant and what's not relevant. You can also use a capability like near duplicate detection to organize the data. So if you think of an email thread where the most recent message actually contains almost all of the subsequent or previous related messages, hey, you just need that most recent message, not all the related content. And so if you actually get rid of all that those other pieces, your review process becomes much more simple and effective. You can also use themes to understand topics represented in the data set, and then search and tagging. So enabling ad hoc searches to save those search queries and then tag those search results with use case specific labels. So case specific labels where then you can start to get this content into the right bucket for review. And as I mentioned, Microsoft has been using this to great effect. We're able to reduce the amount of content that we need to send out to third parties for review drastically, and that's saving us significant time and money of eDiscovery. As you can imagine, we have a lot of ongoing litigation going on at Microsoft, a lot of internal investigations, and this has been a huge value for us and something that we're able to help other customers adopt and gain value from as well. So that's a quick little bit on eDiscovery. We're not going to demo eDiscovery today because we have so much to cover, but I did want to highlight the partner ecosystem. We have a really strong eDiscovery partner ecosystem that are helping our customers adopt and move forward using Office 365 eDiscovery. So if you're looking at eDiscovery from Office 365 or working with one of your clients around that, we recommend you take a look at this partner slide. And if you're working with any of these partners already, bring them into that eDiscovery conversation. If not, these are great folks to start with, and they can really help navigate how you take your current processes and ensure that you meet and exceed those as you come to the cloud and start to use Office 365 eDiscovery capabilities. So let me pause there really quickly as we jump into the control section. We're heading into the home stretch here. This is about how can I have insight into when and how Microsoft needs access to my data. And so this is that piece around transparency and confidence of being in control of your data. Microsoft in an Office 365 context, we're the processor of your data. You're the controller. This comes back to what I mentioned about Microsoft being at the Supreme Court arguing on behalf of our customers that any government requests for data need to go through the customer, not through Microsoft. We're just the processor, you're the controller. And so these capabilities about giving you confidence and assurance that you are in control and you have full transparency into how, when, and if Microsoft ever needs access to your data. So as we mentioned, 63% of executives say concerns about transparency are holding them back from growing cloud. These are some capabilities that we're offering to assure and drive confidence in this space specifically. So what are they? So encryption for Office 365, we have default encryption for both in-transit and at-rest data. And then for particularly sensitive information or more important information, we have additional protections available around encryption. So we've just announced that in transit, we provide Office 365 message encryption, as well as SharePoint Online and rights protection. And then here at the bottom, we're showing a little bit about what key management solution we recommend for what customer type. So for someone who's in A cloud-first customer, agile, born in the cloud, working primarily in the cloud, we recommend a Microsoft Service Managed Key. For someone who's very compliance-focused, we recommend a solution like Customer Key, where you actually the customer owns the encryption key, and we have to request that in order to help with the service. We have Bring Your Own Key for Azure information protection, as well as for Exchange Online. And then for a compliance-first or strictly highly regulated industry, we recommend these pieces around Hold Your Own Key with AIP, and then we support SMIME capabilities as well. So we have a host of options depending on where you are in your journey and your regulation posture that we can help you meet that encryption standard and key management solution. And so Customer Key in Office 365, this is around encrypting your keys with Azure Key Vault. So we're able to provide and manage your own keys used to encrypt the Office 365 data at rest. You have control. You can exercise your control to revoke those keys. So you have the service's ability to you control the service's ability to reason over your data when the key is revoked and validating that, initiating that path towards data deletion. And so this provides added protections for data integrity and availability. It's built into the service for seamless integration, no disruption to the end user, and then it's auditable and verified. And so all the actions are auditable and controls will be verified in our next SOC audit. So this is about, again, ensuring that control and making customers feel very confident that you have the ability to own that and make those decisions. As I mentioned with Office 365 message encryption, this provides ad hoc user controls to automatic policies and protect sensitive data. Non-Office 365 recipients can still read protected messages using their consumer identities, and you're able to easily read these protected emails on any device. And you have, again, the option to provide and manage your own encryption keys. So this is about bringing that encryption into messaging and ensuring that the confidence is there for using our capabilities around messaging. And then Customer Lockbox. And so this is an additional component that's really about meeting compliance needs. So proving that no one else has access to data, proving that there's procedures in place for explicit data access authorization. And so this is, ensuring that anytime that Microsoft needs to access customer data, there's a process in place where the customer has control over that access point. And not only control of that access point, but there's visibility into any actions that were taken. So the most common situation is when Microsoft needs to access customer data in order to respond to a service request or a service interruption. That process is literally goes through the customer admin to approve that, or whoever's been appointed to the Lockbox process to make sure that those activities are approved and that there's an audit trail against those activities so that the customer is in control and can provide verification of that control at any time to a third party. So I think we'll go quickly through how the process works for Customer Lockbox, but you can see here that here's a little bit about the solution and the workflow. And so what we've done with Customer Lockbox is brought the customer back into the workflow before the Microsoft engineer has access to the customer data. So the customer pane is really around meeting the rigorous compliance obligations, ensuring that there's limited access during service operations, and that there's full auditing capability in this space. And so it's important to note as we look at Customer Lockbox, we're engineered to limit the occurrence of operations that require the human touch. So overall, we're seeking to reduce any time that we need to actually touch customer data. That's something that we're trying to avoid. In addition to kind of isolating this content, there's no standing access to this customer content, and personnel are required to adhere to strict standards ensuring customer content is protected at all times. And so this is some of that logical and physical isolation that we talked about at the beginning, where the people who work at the data centers don't have access to the data, and the people who may have access to the data don't actually work at the data centers. And so where access to customer content is necessary, Customer Lockbox allows you to manage the interaction with access restrictions and time bounds in conjunction with this rigorous logging and auditing. And so we believe this is the most common scenario when Microsoft engineer needs to access customer content is when a customer asks us to do so in order to respond to a support issue. So let's take a quick look at how we're going to enable the service here first. So logging at portal.office.com. So in this case, the customer is Fabricam, and they're looking for added control over access to their content during Microsoft service operations. So in order to do this, they're going to leverage customer Lockbox. And so for this demo, I'm going to be Emily Braun, who's a system admin for Fabricam. And so Emily's going to go ahead and log into her account here. So she's going to go ahead and type in there. And she's going to land on the Office 365 homepage. So within the Office 365 portal, you can see we have a number of different apps. In this case, she's going to go ahead and jump into the Admin Center. And so she'll open the App Launcher and click into the Admin Center. And now that Emily's over in the Admin Center, she can navigate to Settings here on the left nav, and she can update the customer Lockbox options. So in this case, they're located under Security and Privacy within Settings. So you can see that open up. And Emily can quickly see the Lockbox is available as part of Fabricam's Office 365 E5 plan, but it's currently set to off. So she's going to go ahead and set that to on. And then she'll go ahead and save that. And so this is a simple click, and now Emily's got her entire organization covered with customer Lockbox, and they'll benefit from the end-to-end compliance it can help to offer. And so from this point on, any access into customer content during the service operations will require Microsoft personnel to receive approval from Emily or another tenant admin in the organization. So you can see now that Lockbox has been enabled, and now that access to that customer data is going to require approval from Emily or someone in her organization. And so let's just take a peek at what this kind of workflow looks like now that it's enabled specifically. So as we mentioned, the most common scenario is we've received a report request which requires support for troubleshooting. For this scenario, Emily is going to submit a service request regarding an issue at the user's mailbox. So she sent the help, hey, we've got an issue with Dave H's mailbox. And so from this, the engineer determines that the mailbox needs to be restored and access to the customer content is required to fix the issue. So by default, the service engineer has no standing access to any of the commandlets that provide access to the customer content. So they need multiple levels of approvals from the Lockbox system to gain access. So here you can see the restore commandlet will not resolve that he's looking for. And so let's build that out a little bit. In order to gain access and resolve the issue, he'll need to submit a request through the Lockbox system and ask permission to run the commandlet. So in here, the engineer is going to submit the request for access. And so we can see this. The request must be specific and include the role, the data location details, the specific request, reason for access, and then the duration. And so as an intelligent system, Lockbox is going to go ahead and validate that request and help to ensure that the request is routed to the right location. So he's submitting that request in. And now the engineer is going to wait to be notified when the environment is accessible and when the service command can be executed. So during this time, assuming the service engineer has provided the appropriate information and passed all the checks by the Lockbox system, the request will be routed to the Microsoft engineer's second-line manager. So now the Microsoft manager is accountable for the requests that are approved and determines if the issue can be fixed without a Microsoft engineer having to go into customers' data. So there's an additional step in the flow to make sure that the request is valid. And so the Microsoft manager is going to receive a notification of the request and validate the need for the human access to the environment. In this scenario, the manager assesses the service portal to view the details of the request and approve elevations. And the manager decides that access to customer data is the only way to address the service request and clicks Approve to move the request forward. So now we can see the manager's approved the engineer's request with the customer Lockbox, and the final step is for the customer to approve the access specifically. So let's see what this looks like from Emily's perspective. So Emily receives an email letting her know that the customer Lockbox request is pending approval. So she switches over to the Admin Center to view and approve the request. And so she's logging back in. And now that she's in the admin portal, she's going to jump over to the Admin Center. And so she's navigating through the app launcher. And so you can see that the request for the customer Lockbox is found under Support. And there it is. And so then I can click the customer lockbox request in the left nav, and I can see that the details of the request are there, and then I can make the choice to approve. And so in this case, I'll go ahead and approve this. Yes, I do want to approve it. And that completes the process that it's been approved. So now that the request is approved, Customer Lockbox will open the environment to the Microsoft engineer and send an alert that the window to perform this service command has been initiated. And so the engineer sees that access has been granted, and he can now execute the command to complete the service request and go ahead and populate that, run that commandlet. So now that when the mailbox restore command is entered, it completes successfully. So then after the requested duration, in this case it's 30 minutes, Lockbox automatically revokes the customer content access that was given to the service engineer, and the requested duration can be up to 4 hours, but in most cases it's only 30 minutes. And so we can see now that the end user's mailbox is restored and the issue is resolved. And so this completes the customer lockbox workflow, and the service request is considered closed. And so that's just a quick look at how this works and how we ensure that the customer has the control needed in order to manage any access to their content as a part of our service. Great. So as we jump back into the last component of our workflow, if you remember how we started out and we talked about assess and govern, discover, control, and now audit. One of the questions we hear is, how can I get alerts and insights into activity in my organization that may increase my risk? And so with the incredible growth in data, the incredible growth in the threats and the attacks that are taking place in the modern workplace environment, this is definitely top of mind. And so within our capability, we have Office 365 auditing, which provides a full view into everything that's going on in your organization. So it's over 1 billion events collected daily across the service. We have hundreds of thousands of searches that are taking place. It's managed through the Security and Compliance Center, but it spans the Office 365 service. So things like Exchange Online, Azure Active Directory, SharePoint Online, and these capabilities, including Power BI. And so we're looking at over 4,000 distinct events that might take place in your service. And we also offer the ability to set up alerts and notifications around these things. So this helps you with insights like anomalous activity. So we actually have an alert that you can set up that's around impossible travel. So if I were to log in from Redmond to my machine and then simultaneously log in from Sydney, Australia, that impossible travel scenario, Nick literally can't be in Redmond and in Sydney at the same time, would trigger an alert to the admin to say we have some anomalous behavior here that might be interesting to investigate. We also have things like erratic behavior, where if someone is all of a sudden downloading lots of content, we can create an alert and alert you about that. You can set levels of control. So if someone with admin credentials is repeatedly signing in, multiple sign-in attempts, you can have a threshold for that, where you can then require multi-factor authentication based on that, or escalate to blocking their access completely until you're able to connect with that individual and understand what's going on. So this auditing capability enables a number of different components that are important for organizations and helps them maintain visibility and insight, and ultimately provide that verifiable audit capability around what's taking place in the Office 365 environment. The way this works is that we have a unified auditing pipeline across our different services and capabilities, and this feeds into that alert policy rule that I mentioned, which you can create notification emails around. You can set it up to just receive alerts within the admin center. And then this also dumps into long-term auditing storage in Office 365 that you can then access via the Compliance Center or via PowerShell commandlet, and then also through the Management Activity API. And some customers are harvesting some of this audit information via the Activity API and then pulling that into customer storage as their long-term storage location for some of these signals and interactions. With the Activity API, we're seeing a kind of a rich ecosystem developing around custom line of business apps and important components. And so you can get a quick sense of some of the partners who are active in this space, some of the things that have been developed. Over 300 third-party apps have been developed on this Activity API already. We have over 2 terabytes of data being downloaded every month, and a number of leading partners like AvePoint, ShareGate, Barracuda are developing on this Activity API on behalf of their customers. So there's a lot of opportunity here as well. That brings me to the conclusion of the Compliance Solutions Overview as a part of the Tech Summit, and I want to thank you for your time, taking the time to listen, and invite you to reach out and engage with myself, Nick Robinson, nickrob@microsoft.com, or any of my team with any additional questions that you might have. We're always looking for feedback and input on how these compliance solutions map to your organization's requirements and what you need to feel confident and assured as you continue your journey to the cloud.